It's great to see a room full of people of lots of faces that I'm not familiar with. I love it. My name's Alan Meban. I'm Presbyterian chaplain at Ulster University, and I'm part of Joining the Dots Together group. We're delighted that you're all here. I'm not sure when I was last in a room with the kind of religious diversity that I think we have represented here. This doesn't happen enough, I think, in Northern Ireland. So you're part of something special, and I think we're part of something special because we care about our shared planet. So I'm very excited to have this event. I want to say welcome to you all, but particularly to Councillor Micky Murray, Lord Mayor of Belfast. Thank you so much for being here. Would you like to say a word? I'm going to invite the Lord Mayor just to greet you.
Hello, good morning, and thank you for that wonderful welcome. Thank you very much. I hadn't really planned on saying anything, but well, here we are. Churches are very much the cornerstone of a lot of communities, whether you are a person of faith or not. Whether it's running childcare or Sunday school or food banks, any number of things, you'll know yourself what's happening in your own churches and your own faith groups. So it's great to see people coming together from all faiths to talk about the very important topic of climate change. And we know locally that it's not just about taking on big corporations, and that is incredibly important because they're the ones doing the mass amount of pollution in the world. But it's also about dealing with the local issues. And as a local councillor, I know how important that is to my local community in terms of the everyday things that we can do, like recycling. But there's also the big issue at the minute, obviously in Northern Ireland with Lough Neagh, and I know Minister Andrew Muir would be delighted that you are all coming together today, and this is one of the topics that you're going to discuss because it's something that he's very passionate about addressing and is very much trying to address through the Northern Ireland Executive. But I just wanted to welcome you all. South Belfast is my constituency. It's the best constituency in Belfast. Is the most diverse constituency in the whole of Northern Ireland, and we've really seen how that diversity in community background, in faith, in country of origin, everything really builds, really adds to the rich heritage and diversity of our area. So you're very welcome, and I'm really excited to hear some of the things that's happening today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Micky. There's a politician who can say what he needs to say and then go and sit down. I'm really impressed. Well done. It was a bit of a risk letting you speak. Glad I did. We have four main speakers with us today. We have Professor Martin Palmer, who's founding president of Faith Invest. I'll say more about each of them later on, but it was knowing that Martin Palmer was coming to talk to a Corrymeela conference on Thursday that triggered us to organise this event today, and we had another schools event yesterday as well. So it's kind of, where's Martin? Where is he? Oh, there he is at the back. It's all your fault, the amount of work we've had to do this week, but I hope that it will be generating a lot of encouragement and hope and creativity and community that will be helpful going forward. Our four speakers are Martin, Xavier Benaze, who's a Jesuit with eco-theology as his passion, perhaps, if that's a fair thing to say, Xavier. Dr. Raja Harun, a retired plant scientist, who's going to talk to us about a document called Al Mizan, Covenant for the Earth, which is an Islamic restatement of principles governing protection of nature. And we have our own Louise Taylor, Dr. Louise Taylor, mobilising for Lough Neagh. They're not coming in that order, so you'll just have to keep with me. It's going to be very exciting. We're going to start, and in between, so we'll have two talks, and then we'll have a little time for you to just talk with each other about what you've heard, because sometimes talking about what you've heard helps you to internalise it. Then we'll have two more talks and another little huddle, and then we're going to let our diverse speakers have a conversation with each other. So I'm going to keep them to 15 minutes each. Okay, I'm going to interrupt them if they go too long, so that we can save up some of the things that they're going to say, they can say to each other at the end. So you're not being put on the spot to give us questions unless I take a notion, because I have microphones here. So we'll see. But ask yourselves the questions about what needs to be going forward and what is it we're learning, so that we can make this change organic and life-giving. Let me see, 10:42. How are we doing for time? I was supposed to start this first speaker at 10:40. That's not too bad, 2 minutes behind. I'm going to invite Dr. Raja Harun to come and speak to us. Retired plant scientist who's devoted his life to plant science. In 2014, he was awarded an MBE for services to commercial horticulture and services to the community in Northern Ireland. I'm not going to say a whole lot more about you, Raja. You come and tell us what's on your heart to share with this diverse group today.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for that. I wasn't expecting to be first. Of course, they say age before beauty. I think I'm one of the oldest people here. In fact, if you really look at me, I'm nearly the age of Biden. Short of 3 years. So I better wash up when I go up and down the stairs to hold on to something. Anyway, thank you for the generous introduction. One thing is missing from the introduction. You know what? It needs to say that I am not a climate scientist. Okay? I'm not a climate scientist. My interest as a plant physiologist is the relationship between plants and environment. That's where the bit of environment comes in. So I begin with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, means in the name of God, the most compassionate and the most merciful. And I also begin with the Islamic greetings, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. So with grateful praise of God, the Lord of all beings, to the number of stars in the sky, the grains of sand, the waves of the water, the drops of rain, the leaves of the trees, and all things good throughout the heavens and earth. Each thing that God has created is a sign of His power, wisdom, and grace, and we seek insight, understanding, and guidance from these signs. He has unfolded all things in balance with one another, in need of one another, and all and support one another. Nothing is created wantonly or in vain. So I'm standing here to give a very brief summary and my take of the over 100-page document called Al-Mizan, which means balance. Let me show you the document. As you can see there, that is the document of Al-Mizan, which was produced at the 8th Islamic Conference of Environmental Ministers, excuse me, and in 2019, and subsequently through the United Nations Environmental Programs, Faith for Earth Coalition in 2024. Al-Mizan is a covenant for the Earth to be a global platform to link environmental issues with Islamic teachings. So there is this consciousness that what is in the Quran has to be practiced to look after them, for people to look after the environment. It was produced by a group of over 300 organizations to demonstrate how Islam can be a driving force for sustainable development and environmental care. This document highlights the importance of culture and religion in driving behavioral change along with scientific, technical, and political situation. So, since this is an Islamic outlook, I will briefly need to explain what is this religion of Islam. I'm sure some of you may want to know. Islam is an encompassing religion of the Abrahamic faith about belief and submission to one God. In Arabic, it's called Allah. In Hebrew, it's Elohim. Correct me if I'm wrong. In Aramaic, it's Allah. Allah is neither male or female. Islam is a monotheistic religion, the bedrock of Islamic ethos. A religion that asks one to do good and shun evil, a comprehensive way of life. It is an encompassing religion practiced by about 2 billion people in the world. Muslims in the world are of very many nationalities. And in fact, if you look at Belfast alone, there are about 12,000 Muslims, but from 42 to 50 different countries. And they are all different. You'll be surprised that that's not just because they are Muslim, you expect them to be the same. But they're different. People from Somalis are different from people from Uganda. Isn't it? You don't expect that. You don't think that. They're all different. They speak different languages. They have different cultures. And yet we label them as Muslims. And then what do Muslims believe? They believe, of course, in the one God. They believe in angels. They believe in the various messengers chosen by God, for example, which you all know. There's Noah, there's Ayub or Job, there's Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace be upon them all. And they have to believe what was revealed to these messengers. And what was revealed to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is in the Quran. You may wonder, what is the Quran? It is Islam's holy book, revealed about 1400 years ago, in the 7th century AD. This Quran has not been changed and is perfectly preserved and written, and there are oral records. The Quran has 114 chapters, they call them surahs, made of 6,236 verses. And it is memorized by millions of people. My sister's grandsons, for example, memorized the Quran, 3 of them. It's amazing. All you need is to mention one verse, and the person is able to continue it just like that. So the Quran is there as a guidance. Okay? Now, that's just a simple question here. I don't want to take too long, and I've forgotten how many minutes I have left. Does anyone know how many times the name of Prophet Muhammad is mentioned in the Quran? 4 times. Jesus? 35 times. Moses? 120 times. Mary, the mother of Jesus, is venerated as highly righteous. And in fact, there are 2 specific chapters, chapters 3 and chapter 19, out of the 114 chapters, especially for Mary. Amazing, isn't it? Okay. Now, I'll go to the Al-Mizan. In the document Al-Mizan, as you can see there, man has changed the face of the earth. We struggle to restore its equilibrium. We have pollution. Look at that. From insecticides, to radiation, contaminated the air, the atmosphere is overloaded with greenhouse gases from burning fossil fuel. Soils are eroded and impoverished. Oceans fill with plastic. Alpine glaciers and polar ice caps, I was thinking of polar bears there. Sea levels rise, coral reefs bleach and die. Now you can see there are increasing frequency of violence of hurricanes, wildfires, floods and droughts. Exotic species proliferate in ecosystems which are alien, and native species die off at the rates never seen before by humankind. And to add to these problems, warfare and violent conflicts, which are mutually destructive, continue unabated. All this brings death and grievous sufferings to the most vulnerable, the impoverished, the dispossessed, persecuted refugees, children, women, the aged, and the disabled. Those are least to blame for corruption and devastation, and they pay the highest price. Now we have about 110 million displaced people in the world. We know our world is not in a good state. You know it yourself. If you go to anywhere, other parts of the world, nearer the tropics, for example, as they say in Northern Ireland, the heat is wild. Yeah, it's really heat's wild. In 1992, the Manifesto of World Scientists Warning to Humanity cautioned that a great change in our stewardship of the earth and the life on it is required if vast human misery is to be avoided. And they declared that human beings and the natural world are on a collision course. And if not checked, many of our current practices may also alter the living world, that we will be unable to sustain life in the manner that we know. Now, the Quran has already reminded mankind that the earth was created in balance. And the earth, it says in Quran 15, chapter 15, verse 19 to 20, and the earth, we have spread it out and cast in it mountains, standing firm. I mean, these are verses of 1400 years ago. And grown in it all things in equilibrium. And we have provided it sustenance for you and for those whom you do not support. In other words, other creatures. And that there is no animal that moves on the earth, nor any bird that wings its flight, but is a community like yourselves. How am I doing? How many minutes? Now, the Al-Mizan quoted the Quran that we have sent our messengers with clear signs. We have sent the book and balance with them so that humankind might establish fairness. That he has set the balance, that you may not exceed the balance, weigh with justice, and do not fall short in balance. He has spread out the earth for all living creatures, not only just ourselves, everything. And the Quran also reminded when the Lord said to the angels, I will create successive human authority or Khalifa on earth. In the broadest sense of the word, to shepherd the earth, to be responsible in looking after it, including its creatures, rather than just to exploit it. It is man's duty, individually and collectively, to do so, to act as caretakers of the earth. In Islamic terminology, individual obligation is fardu ain, whereas collective obligation is called fardu kifaya. Even as long as 1400 years ago, the Quran is warned that corruption has appeared in the land and the sea by what the hands of mankind have wrought. He may let them taste the consequences of their deeds so that they may turn back. See? It's already a warning that what we're doing, we're messing about with the earth, but that we must turn back. But this is because man loves wealth. For the love of wealth, man is violent. They love wealth with abounding love. Corruption has appeared in the land and the sea by what the hands of mankind have wrought. Yes, sorry, I missed a slide there. That man has gathered his wealth of this world and arranged it. He thinks this wealth will render him immortal. There is a specific instruction in the Quran that waste not by excess, for God loves not the wasters. And indeed, the wasters are brothers of the devils. So the document Al-Mizan identified the main cause of the problems that we have in the world today is a direct consequence of the priority we are giving to economic growth, managed by corporations more powerful than most nations, overcarrying the earth communities of life, taking precedence over living in harmony with nature. So what's the way forward? Okay, we identified the problems. What do we do about it? Call to action. Again, the Quran reminded that God will not change the condition of people until they change what is in themselves. We have to decide, what do we do about this world? It's an absolute mess. But again, the Quran reminded, let there be a community amongst you, every one of us, that calls for what is good and urges what is right and forbids what is wrong. This is why we are here today, to do something about it. We have to align Islamic teachings with the need for environmental stewardship with balance, sustainable living, and prohibition of wastefulness. To establish weight with justice and not fall short of the balance. So what do? We have to promote public good and prevent harm. Emphasis on moderation and responsible use of resources, respect for all creation. So the way forward is for the individuals. Every one of us, we have to do certain things. I'm not going to cover all of it because it's going to be long and it needs a lot of thoughts into it. But for individuals like you, me, when I go home, I have to think about that. We have to adopt. There's a lot of those. We have to adopt sustainable practices, reduce, reuse, recycle, to practice frugal moderation. Because I've seen, for example, I'm from Malaysia, the amount of plastic that is thrown is absolutely unacceptable. Water conservation, limit your water use, fix leaks, support local and ethical products, support local farmers, buy local produce, carbon footprint, engage in environmental initiatives, educate, inspire others. There's a lot of other roles that we have to do, which is too much. This role of government, for our Lord Mayor, he has got a role in there. Now, so in conclusion, let's offer a prayer. We ask the Lord of all beings to guide us, all humankind, to mend the devastation in the earth, that we, as a species and as individuals, to cease distorting his creation, to return to the natural way of God in which he originated us. We ask, Lord of all beings, to guide us aright, to care for this beautiful, glorious earth and all that live on it, and to help us remember, show gratitude, and render devotion most beautiful, and to bear in mind what the Quran says. The servants of all the merciful are those who walk on earth, who walk gently on the earth. Amen to that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raja Harun. What a heartfelt and I just felt a lovely call to us all, and I didn't expect, as a Presbyterian, I didn't expect to hear something that appealed so much to my heart from Islam. So thank you. You've touched me, and I hope all of us. We're going to do a handbrake turn. Dr. Louise Taylor, mobilising for Lough Neagh. We've gone from Malaysia, and our brother from Malaysia who came and studied here at Queen's University, to Louise Taylor, who's a researcher at the Centre for Sustainability, Equality and Climate Action at Queen's University. And she's also a therapist committing to working with activists and academics to highlight the importance of mental health and wellness and equity in the struggle for climate justice. There's more I could say, but Louise, come and you say it. Please welcome Dr. Louise Taylor.
How are you all doing? I'm Lou. I began a group, right? I would like to say thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I really enjoyed what happened in Glengormley yesterday evening. It was Land on the Loch. And John McClenaghan, who is Vice President of the Ulster Farmers Union, is somebody who I really have a lot of respect for. And I really have a lot of time, and actually as a result of the Lough Neagh campaign, it's been those connections, I think, from my perspective, those critical friendships, those strong allegiances with farmers that I think are the most important thing to come out of this. Often environmentalists or people like I would, look, any day, you see, it depends on who phones me. BBC, I'm a political ecologist. They like that, Or if it's the newsletter, political ecologist, Loverlock founder. But actually, we're many, many things. We're complex humans. And I was thinking about it whenever I was coming here. I was like, I don't like the word environmentalist. I don't like it. It's the mentalist. It makes us all seem a little bit crazier. You know what I mean? To me, it's like, I love life. And it's that simple. I love life. Another day I'm an ecotherapist, but I am an ecotherapist, and I am a political ecologist, and I am a mother, and I am an academic researcher. I'm not paid a lot. People like the academic thing, but that doesn't pay my bills as well as my clients as a therapist. So I think the Lough Neagh campaign, it's not an environmentalist campaign. It's a life, it's a quality of life. It's the Lough, anybody can see that the Lough has suffered. And the people have suffered, watching that suffering. And it's not the farmers' fault, as John says. But John, what I really love about listening to John is he's honest. And he's telling the truth. And he's like, stop thinking about blame and who's to blame. And he's right. The stats, the science is it's agricultural runoff, it's NI water, and it's septic tanks. And in Northern Ireland, for whatever reasons, we love blame. Right, whose fault is it? It's not mine. No, mine. No. I'm not a farmer, I don't have any land, and, you know, I'm really, really good, so it's not mine. Whereas actually what Loch Ness is showing us is that our quality of life, our air, our water, our earth has been put on the back burner, and we've neglected it for other reasons, for other agendas. We have had, you know, like Northern Ireland, I adore this place. I have a deep, deep love for it, but my goodness, I feel frustrated. I feel deeply frustrated with us as a people, you know, because, you know, we had it worse. It's their fault. Who's to blame? Farmers do this. You know, NI Water needs to do this. Whereas it was my idea of the week, by the way. It was my idea. I didn't agree with everything that happened with it, but it was a joke actually, and then it became a thing. And the wake was about, does everybody know what I mean whenever the wake? Did you see the photos of carrying the coffin? That's James Orr's fault, by the way. I did not want the coffin. And then he made me get in front of it because he said it looked really good. A bit of flattery gets you a long way with me. So I was at the front, and the next thing, that image goes internationally, and I'm carrying a made-up coffin that's supposed to be Loch Ness. But the idea of the wake was a wake-up call for the population as to the dire situation of the loch. To me, I spent a lot of time around Loch Ness. Loch Ness is not dead, okay? But the headlines last summer were dying in plain sight. That was The Guardian. And you could understand why they were saying that, because things were in a really, really bad way, particularly ecologically. But it's the water source of 40% of the population. So I wrote, I started Love Our Loch earlier in the year, and nobody cared because they just thought I was mad because I was talking about love in Northern Ireland, and people were like, whoa, that's a bit much. But it came from a place of learning. It came from some of the books I brought. It came from the Joanna Macy's of the world. It came from John O'Donoghue. It came from understanding that love is the most powerful agent. It's the most powerful force for change. Love is the reason that mothers can lift cars to save children. Love is the reason that people have, you know, Rosa Parks didn't stand up. You know, I was like, I'm not doing it. It's not fair. I love myself. I love who I am, and I'm not standing up. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not playing that game. Jesus loved, and look at how he was treated. So love, I was like, right, I'm going to step up. I'm going to look like a fool. You have to be a good activist. You have to be ready to look like a fool. And I'm going to say, I think we should love our loch. And people ignored me, and I didn't care, to be honest, because I was quite happy loving the loch, doing my thing. And then the algae blooms happened. And I said, right, I think we should come together on my wee Facebook page. I think we should come together and do something for the loch. This is pretty bad. And a lovely man wrote, it's too late. There's nothing can be done, right? It's too late, it's dead. And I said, well, because I know the country loves a wake, right? Everybody loves a good wake. So I was like, well, if you think it's dead and there's nothing that can be done, I think the least we could do is give it a damn good wake. And he said, sounds like a plan. And that's how that idea, and then somebody else said, I said, that's a bit mad. I was like, and then somebody else said, no, that sounds like a good idea. And then another and another and another. And then before you knew it, we had the wake for Loch Ness. And people have said to me, I didn't like what you did. They've said, I didn't like what you did. That made me feel really uncomfortable. I was like, did it? Yeah. Did it make you feel uncomfortable? Well, that's what it was supposed to do. That was the idea. You were supposed to have an emotional reaction. You were supposed to connect to the issue, to the crisis. And that's it. That is the hardest thing I found, because I was brought up Protestant. I was brought up in Unionist tradition. I was brought up, you're not supposed to be difficult. You're not supposed, especially as a woman, you're not supposed to make people feel uncomfortable. That's not nice. That's not nice. You're not being kind. I feel uncomfortable with what you said. You're unkind. You're a bad woman. I'm a difficult woman. And difficult women are not always nice. There's two things that generally often get me into trouble. And I call it beautiful trouble, and that's what we need. We need lots of people creating beautiful trouble. Being honest, okay? Like John yesterday, he's honest, and that's what I respect. I really respect that. And being intelligent, and I don't mean to be rude, but that has got me into lots of trouble. Because it's through my education and through the level of awareness that I've felt like it was cruel, it was negligent, particularly as a mother, not to act. So it was actually that education, that level of awareness, that understanding what needs to be done, that understanding of what is effective, that has got me into lots of trouble. But what I found is that the more I connect with nature, the more I connect with the natural world, the more I connect with the Loch, which is, as an ecotherapist, the more I connect with others, eco-philosophers, eco-theologians, other environmental activists and different things, my path is completely, there is no path before, nobody's done this before, but I get that support and that strength to keep moving and to keep doing things and to keep me right. And I know when I'm slightly veering off it, and I'll know when the signs are good that I'm on the right path. Like Cheryl, you meeting me today, I was like, yeah, I'm supposed to be here. Last night as I was walking into the meeting, I bumped into somebody who actually taught me elocution as a child. And I was like, there's my public speaking. You know, you've given me this voice. You've helped me. Libby Keys, I don't know if you've ever heard of Libby Keys and Alan Keys, doing incredible work. And I bumped into her as I was walking into that meeting. And again, the signs were like, this is where you're supposed to be. And I don't know how long I've got, but I'm going to close up. I'm going to close, but I'm so grateful. And it's called the Agape Centre. So wow, I was like, this is brilliant, because there's Climate Crack Festival happening right now. Oh, they don't? Do you know what agape means? It's a love of the earth, love of humanity, love of the planet, and I'm obsessed with different forms of love, and that's actually those books. And Joanna Macy talks about that connection with that agape, that greater than self, the greater than the family, the love of humanity, the love of the planet. That's what we're encouraging people to tap into when they connect with living systems struggles. Let's not call it environmentalism, but vibrant, thriving ecosystems, thriving communities, and thriving natural environments. So I'm just trying to make sure I've got everything. So with regards to Lover Loch, this is another thing I want to leave you with, right? Lover Loch's a collective, okay? Collective, right? I started in a collective, and that means that I'm not in charge and I'm not the leader, right? But I was like, right, you do it, you do. Everybody, I had lots of people telling me what I was doing wrong. Oh, this is great. People are like, you need to do this. I was like, you know what? You could do it. How about you do it? You do it. Honestly, I am giving you full permission to do what you think I'm doing wrong. And the thing with the collective that I've come to learn is people do like leaders. They do. And I am reluctantly leading this because nobody else will. And that's one of the things about, I think, being an activist, right? I often thought that somebody should do something about that, right? Then I realised that I was somebody. So what I say to you is, if you think things need to be done or think that things should be differently, I beg you, and while our politicians might not want to get the begging bowl out because they're a bit too, I'm begging you to do something. Because we need more people doing things. And that's the problem. We have a lot of critics in this country. We don't have enough people acting. And that's what I hope I leave you with. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to do things perfectly. But we do need people doing more. And we just don't have it. So I want to encourage you all to go forth and create beautiful trouble. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Louise. We've had two speakers, very different, coming from very different places, very different tone. Have a wee chat to each other about what you're hearing, what you're feeling, and what you're thinking. You just have a wee 5-minute huddle with somebody nearby you. You don't have to feed back. I hope that you're finding relationship and encounter and breath, all good stuff. Let's just have a wee pause, a wee moment. Just breathe. This air that we share, this atmosphere that is a gift to us. These magical bodies that take that oxygen in and transform it into energy and thoughts, smiles and sparkles in the eye. Life, what a gift. I'm really grateful for you and for breath. Thank you, God. I'm also very grateful for the opportunity to speak French today. Because our next speaker is Xavier Benaze. I don't know if there's a proper Northern Irish way of saying Xavier de Benaze. I don't know. You're very welcome. Xavier is a Catholic priest, a member of the Jesuit community in France. And after studying agricultural engineering, where he made the link between social justice and the climate crisis, he began a professional life as a sustainable development consultant. But God has called him into other spheres. I'm not going to take up all my time telling you about that. I hope, Xavier, you'd like to come and give us 15 minutes of something of your experience, of your faith and the climate.
Thanks. Thank you very much for inviting me. I've been traveling through Ireland during the past 2 weeks, some eco-retreats, some lectures, and 4 days of hiking in Kerry. And that was great to connect with your beautiful land. I'm going to speak of another piece of land named Le Châtelard. It's close by Lyon, so let's say in the center of France. Lyon is the second biggest city, and the Jesuits have a spiritual center just outside of the city. It's been a spiritual center for more than 100 years, and I was sent there 2 years ago to help for the discernment and then to start a new project of this place as an eco-spiritual center. So the project, the source of it, it's not that someday I get up and I say, well, why don't we do an eco-spiritual center? There is this big movement in society and in the different religions of the world to see the state of the planet and then to look for solutions, to look for a deep source of love that could help us to care for not only the planet, but the land we love, the people we love, to take care of ourselves. So that's where it's coming from. And in the Catholic Church, it was all brought together by a text of Pope Francis in 2015 that was inviting all people, and particularly Catholics, to act. And we need actions on this topic. And so, based on this invitation, the provincial, the responsible of the Jesuits in France, was having in his mind these two questions, more or less: how do we develop a deep Christian eco-spirituality that can help people to journey and to face this challenge with others. So these are nice questions, they are deep ones, but for the last 2 years, my mission is to say, how do we make them concrete? So the piece of land where I'm trying to insert myself is with 40 hectares, mainly woods, a bit of pastures. So I told you 100 years of history as a spiritual center. So I think we are really blessed to be nourished deeply by 100 years of prayer, of people taking time in this place to listen to God, to listen to their inner movements. And that's really helpful. And in a way, this has been the source of an involunteer care of creation for 100 years. Because when you come for an eco-spiritual, just a spiritual retreat, well, you're not consuming a lot. You don't want new fancy things every day. You just want silence and beauty. And so for 100 years, this place has been safeguarded for the sake of prayer, for the sake of silence. And so all around us, the city has grown, and so it's full of new houses. But our place is a kind of sanctuary, not because of ecological reasons, because of spiritual reasons, I would say, at the beginning. And now we are realizing that this is all deeply interconnected. So this place is now cared for by a community with 14 employees, 7 Jesuits, 250 volunteers, and that's a great gift. And it allows us, this community allows us to share this place and to share the treasure of spirituality with 2,500 people who come for different kind of retreats in this place. So an eco-spiritual center, what does that mean? I think it can mean a lot of different things. I was yesterday in Antasaklastat, I don't know how do you say it really in English, in Irish, but a Dominican sister place in Wicklow that you could define as an eco-spiritual center. So it's easier to go there than to come to Châtelet. You're most invited, but you have an eco-spiritual center very, very nice and in your place, so you could visit. But what we went to speak with 300 people over 1 year, church, Catholic, Protestant, outside the church, Buddhist, Hindus, well, a lot of different peoples. And that brought us to advise the board of the spiritual center, saying if we want to start an eco-spiritual center, we can imagine a project with 3 pillars, 3 Ps: the place, the people, and the program. So the place is a very important part because, as Louise was saying, we need action. And most of the people nowadays in the Catholic world or in the eco world, what they want to see is action, that some things can be done and can change. And so we need this concrete place where we are taking care of biodiversity. We've planted hedges, we've dug 2 new ponds, we've brought some sheep, a donkey, well, a lot of different things. We've changed all the food system to make it local and organic, mostly vegetarian, and we will start in the coming month a big work of renovation on the buildings, because that's what people want to see. How do you implement change? Not only speak about it, but really do it. So that's the place part, and it's very important. It's also very important that touches with the program part, because the place is what make concrete this idea of connection. I told you, I'm trying to insert myself in a land and in a living community that was here before me and that will be here after me. We have oak tree that dates back 150, 200 years. They will be here where I'm gone. I will be here for maybe 6 years as a Jesuit. So they've seen many Jesuits and they will see others. So I'm in a way, I'm coming into their land. And so in our retreats, how do we develop this sense of an eco-spirituality that helps us to connect with creation? And I would say in my Christian context, how do we try to develop that in the program? Not making Christian fellows afraid of coming back to a sort of paganism, of worshipping trees, because that are fears that can be present for some of the Christian people. So how do we help them in a concrete context of a retreat, of an eco-retreat? How do we help them to connect with creation as a spiritual path that helps them to discover the love of God? That's one of the things we try to do in the eco-retreats. And all this, taking care of the place, developing eco-retreats, well, there is nothing you can do without people. And so it's a great challenge. It's a great source of energy for us, this new project, but it's also a great challenge because in this big community of 250, 300 people, some of them are really willing to change. Some of them just came over the past 2 years because things are happening and lines are moving. But some of them are not, they are not resistant, but they are cautious, to say at the least. We never really love change, apart from some of us. Most of the human beings, well, we're good. Life is good, so don't change it. So how do we take care of each other to make this adventure possible? And how do we integrate also poor people or people with disabilities? And that's something, at least in the French Catholic world, people will tell us, okay, so you're doing an eco-spiritual center, so that means integral ecology, so that means to hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. So we have developed partnerships with different NGOs, working with refugees, working with people from poor areas in Lyon, to try to share this treasure of the eco-spiritual center. Just to give you a taste of the kind of retreats we develop, to dive in a little bit the spiritual part and the type of people who come. So we develop retreats that are very close to the basic Ignatian, so St. Ignatius, who started the Jesuit basic Ignatian methodology. So we take this, we insert little things, and that makes a deep eco-retreat that is not too much different from the usual for people. But we also develop, and Louise was mentioning Joanna Macy, we also developed retreats that connect the Christian faith with the work that reconnects methodology, for example. That's what we did during 3 days at the beginning of the week in the Manresa Spiritual Center in Dublin. 3 days of eco-retreats that brings together the work that reconnects and the gospel. So, yeah, how do you take care and love your own religious tradition and start a dialogue with other things that are around us and that a lot of my eco-friends would use to take care of their inner life. And in these eco-retreats, this year we may have welcomed 300 people in different settings. Most of them are Christian people who are involved in ecology and are looking for a place where they can be both at the same time. And because with the eco people, they say, I can't be Christian, and with the Christian people, I can't be eco. So I need a place to be deeply connected and one person. Then we have Christian people who come and say, there must be something here, but I need something deep to start this journey. And so I come for an eco-retreat to open the gate to the Spirit of God and see what's going to happen. And then we have 10% of the people coming who are very far from any church institution. Can be people with no faith, can be people, they didn't have any official spiritual life for 20, 30 years, and the ecological crisis is starting an inner crisis. So they are in a quest of meaning, and they come to our place. We had a Buddhist woman coming with her husband, participating in a retreat. So I really think it can be a place of dialogue. And that will be the last 3 slides, just to give you a taste and some pictures, some exercises we try to do to develop this connection with creation. People love being outside. It's very easy. You don't need a lot of things. Just take some minutes outside and pay attention to what you see. Disconnect from your phone and connect with creation. But you need to introduce people. You need concrete exercises. And for example, we've switched to a local, mostly vegetarian food. So that means you must peel potatoes, and it takes time. But people are really happy to help for 1 hour in the morning. Some 5 people per day, it's always full. You don't need to go and look for people. They just volunteer. And that's the last one. I spoke about some of the eco-retreats exercise. And in the middle, you have an existing chapel in Paris that I think could be defined as an eco-chapel. And we hope to build one brand new in our place to help to make this deep connection. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Xavier. Another really different input. I'm really encouraged. Our final speaker today, Professor Martin Palmer, is an expert on everything, I want to say. Don't know how you feel about that. He's an international specialist on all major faiths, can you believe that? And religious traditions and cultures. He's the author and editor of more than 20 books on religious and environmental topics. He's translated many ancient Chinese texts. He's a regular contributor to the BBC, which is obviously high up there on his CV. But founding president of Faith Invest, and was previously Secretary General of the Alliance of Religions and Conservation, which was founded with His Royal Highness Prince Philip in 1955, to help faiths develop environmental and conservation projects based on their own beliefs and practices. Martin, would you come and
Thanks very much indeed. And ARC wasn't founded in 1955, which would make me about 100. It was 1995. But, you know, close. I just thought I'd point that out in case I looked that old and she thought I must be that old. And I just thought, you know, old is in the mind a lot, you know. Yeah? What? Does it say 95 on the thing? Well, there you are, you see. Exactly. As Louise so accurately said, blame somebody. So it's a great pleasure to be here. It really is. And thank you to everybody, the Interfaith Network for Northern Ireland and joining the dots together and everybody else. It's been a fantastic trip. An exciting time because I spend a lot of my time having to negotiate for faiths with blocks like the UN and World Bank and the environmental world. I am so with you on that one. And to actually hear so much over the last 3 days, seems like a month, has been enormously moving. And I think the most moving thing, and I want to share it with you, is that I spend a lot of time dealing with people for whom entering into the crisis of climate, the crisis of the loss of, let's not call it biodiversity, nature, creation, beauty, is a deeply traumatic experience, and they feel as though they're entering into a long, dark tunnel. There's no light at the end. And a lot of my time is spent dealing with the appalling impact of crap environmental work that has created eco-fear, thinking that if you scare the hell out of people, you make them better. And I keep saying, I come from the world of religion. We've tried that. Let me tell you, it doesn't work. But it not only doesn't work, it does more damage than you can possibly imagine. And I come here, and I was up at Corrymeela, which, my God, what a beautiful setting. Oh, my God. I've known about Corrymeela for years, but I'd no idea of the setting. We had a whole day, and part of it in the afternoon was talking of stories of hope, and it's something I do a lot of, because I do have hope. I have hope because of my own faith, but I have hope because of the things I see from the different faiths around the world. But very often I'm kind of trying to get people to be hopeful. And what I found here in Northern Ireland is you've been through hell. You've been in dark places where it looked as though this was going to be what it was forever. And you've come out the other side. Not perfectly, not claiming that, but you've come out the other side. You've held on to hope. And Corrymeela is a wonderful example of that. But it's not only Corrymeela. Everybody who told their story, from all sorts of backgrounds, had a story of hope because what they had grown up with had been changed into something that they've grown into. You're unique. The only place I've ever come across that is South Africa with the Justice and Truth Commission. So you have a great gift to offer, which is hope. And if you can produce a few more Louises who actually set fire, then you really have a major contribution to make. Because there is a lot of fear, a lot of gloom and doom. And I think one of the things that the faiths bring to the whole environmental movement, whatever phrase you want to use, is that we bring this revolutionary idea of celebration. And I think, if I'm right, Louise, a wake in Northern Ireland is actually a celebration. Yeah. We know that if it's not worth celebrating, it's probably not worth saving. Whereas so much of the language is, you have to do this, got to do this, economically you have to do this, etc. So I want to just very quickly tell you a little bit about what else is going on, because you're not alone. But I began this work with His Royal Highness Prince Philip, who is a great character. I have said this to a couple of you before, but I was his religious advisor on the environment for 35 years, which was occasionally a wee bit like being etiquette advisor to Attila the Hun. But it was also rather fun, to put it mildly. And his vision was, he was the head of WWF International, and they were coming up to their 25th anniversary in 1986. And he went to the meeting of WWF's council, and they'd already planned it. It was going to be on economics. It was going to be in Jakarta. They'd booked the hotels and the speakers, and he looked at the program, and he said, well, I'm not coming. And they went, what do you mean you're not coming? You're our international president. You've got to come. He said, no. He said, look, if it was data that was going to save the planet, we'd be on our way. We have all the data we need. This was in 1986. But we're not actually touching hearts and minds. We're not touching the soul. And he said, I've just read this book, which I'd written for schools, on how 8 different belief systems, from humanism to Taoism to Buddhism to Christianity, the Yanomamo Aboriginal, how those different belief systems and the stories they told about why we're here shaped what we then did to protect the planet, or not in certain cases. He said, I've just read this book, and why don't we invite the major religions? He only knew 5, so we did 5. Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, and Islam. Why don't we invite them and ask them what they are doing and why they would do it to protect the earth? And so we did. We came together in a CC with those 5 faiths, and each faith produced its first ever statement on the environment. There'd never been. Nobody had ever asked the faiths to say, and we only gave them 2,000 words. If you're working with religions, restrict them. Do not let them have their way. Just make sure, 10 minutes is enough. If you can't say it in 10 minutes, I'm an Anglican. The Anglican sermon is 7 minutes long. 10 minutes, we're pushing it a bit and heading towards kind of these nonconformists. You really don't want to be going that way. They're not going to go that way. So we get these 2,000 word statements, and that gave us enough to go back to each faith later and say, you know what you said on page 2 about this or that, or protection of nature. Well, would that mean that you would be on board for example, the Forest Stewardship Council? And the faiths are really quite interesting. They don't know how much they own or influence. So we did an audit in 1997 first, and again in 2007, and we're in the midst of another one now, to find out really what did the faiths actually own. Because Prince Philip and I, we set up this program in Assisi. We had all these faiths. It began the program. Nobody had ever talked about faith and environment before. And what I would say is, and Louise is a particularly good example of this, the religious movement on the environment did not come from the religions. We needed prophets. Now, I know you like being called all sorts of things, but not an environmentalist. So I'm going to call you a prophet. And prophets in our Abrahamic traditions are the ones who have challenged the religious status quo to remember what we've forgotten, or what we've buried, or what we're frightened of. So it's been people like Louise, people like Prince Philip, who have said, what are you doing? Why aren't you doing? What could we do more? Come and join us. Get involved. That's been enormously important. But then we increased the scale of the number of faiths that were involved. We have 12 major faiths that have made great statements on the environment, but within those faiths we have hundreds of subgroups of the faiths, exactly as Raja said. What a Muslim in Somalia understands by Islam, what an Indonesian understands by Islam are totally different. Well, with Christianity, multiply that by a factor of about 5 million, you're about close to where we are. So we've built on those differences, and that's a very important part of what we do. A lot of people want all the religions to be the same and to say the same thing. And I've been to interfaith meetings where that's been the norm, and they are so monumentally boring and utterly irrelevant. Because actually what we have in our different traditions are jewels of understanding, jewels of stories that we can tell that make us think differently. I guess that quite a lot of us today, hearing Raja giving that beautiful exposition of Islam, would have gone, oh, don't know that. Do we have anything like that? That idea, for example, that all creation is loved by God and all creation has its place in evolution and we're just part of it, is immensely powerful, because an awful lot of Christianity, an awful lot of secular thinking assumes that the whole of life, whole of evolution, is to make us comfortable. I think that's one of the biggest heresies we could possibly have. So around the world, every major faith now has powerful statements on the environment, and they live it. And they bring different stories. My favorite one, some of you have heard this before, so apologies, is that the faiths own about 5% of all the commercial forests in the world. Another 15% of forestry, which is sacred mountains, sacred woods, sacred valleys, is protected by the faiths. It may not be owned by them, but it has tended to keep the biodiversity because they're sacred. But we had this big meeting of the religious forest owners. And this was Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, Jain, Sikh, and Shinto from Japan. And there was this great, marvelous sense of how we could protect the forests. And the Maronites of Lebanon, and Orthodox Christians, but in relationship with the Pope, said, why don't we just call all of our forests faith-protected forests? And just about everybody went, yeah, great. And Shinto kind of went, I said, what? And they said, but that's ridiculous. We don't protect the forests. They protect us. It's the same with the waters. We don't protect the loch. The loch protects us. We don't protect the sky. The sky protects us. And we need to overthrow some of the norms that we think are just how it all ought to be explained. Because all we're doing is putting ourselves in the center when actually we should be pushing ourselves more to the edges. And I think I've just knocked the sign off. And then you have also the whole growth of faith-based statements. So Al-Mizan is an amazing document, come out of many years of work. A lot of this was when the Muslims in Indonesia issued the first ever fatwas, this absolute Islamic teaching, break this teaching and you go to hell, against the illegal wildlife and the illegal forestry. Massive impact. Eco-Sikh, which created Sikh Environment Day, only about 12 years ago, and the first one had 400 Gurdwaras and Sikh buildings and organizations. Now it has over 10,000 being involved. The Orthodox Church, who created the beginning of Creation Tide by creating in 1989, September the 1st, as the Day of Creation and Prayer, and within 4 years, 40,000 Orthodox churches were doing special events for that. So you're not alone. Or the Taoists of China, who when we brought the head of the Deputy Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations to explain about climate change, and he did all the usual stuff, all the data and all the rest of it. And at the very end of it, the Taoist master stood up and said, I think what this chap is trying to say is it's like yin and yang. Fossil fuels is yin, it should stay in the earth. When we burn it, it becomes yang, and that completely distorts the balance. So our job is to rebalance the planet. I think that's what he's trying to say. And we need that. We need to focus on narrative. We are a storytelling species. I mean, I've met you a number of times now. I have no idea how old you are. I don't know how much you weigh. I have no idea how many calories you had for breakfast this morning. But I do know that, like me, you struggle with faith. I do know, like you wear a brooch which tells you, we've gone off, tells you that you have a journey to make. So let's tell ourselves the stories of change.
Alan, do you want to try this one?
Because I'm about to finish anyway. Oh, okay. Okay, the mic is working, but the PA isn't. Okay, so let me just finish. I just want to encourage you all to tell stories. To tell stories like the one Louise done, like Xavier's done, of taking something and turning it around, giving it a new story, a new narrative. Because the future has to be told as stories, and it has to be pluralist. It has to be a diversity of stories. Because if you look at a forest that has been developed as a monoculture, there's no growth of anything else there. If you look at a natural forest, it is full of diversity. So let's celebrate a world of religious, cultural, narrative diversity. So if anyone says to you, what we need is a new narrative, say no. We need lots of narratives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very impressed with your timekeeping. That was really, in fact, all four of you were great. Take a wee moment, everybody, just to listen to what you've been listening to. Let it go a little bit deeper. Sometimes when you hear too many words, they kind of wash over. So have a wee moment, either quietly or chat to your neighbour. Tell each other what you heard, either from Xavier or from Martin, or thinking back to making connections with what we heard earlier on. And after 5 minutes, I'll tell you what we're doing next. If you have a question that is arising for you, sometimes in these events, members of the audience desperately want to ask a question, but sometimes the rest of the audience doesn't want to listen to you asking the question. So would you give me your questions? If you have a question you would like asked, come to me and tell me what it is. We've got a bit of time. What I really want is for our participants to talk to each other and to ask each other questions. And because we brought these four fabulous people, I think a conversation between them would be really interesting. But if you have something that you want to put into that conversation, please give it to me in the next 5 minutes. Okay? Continue to chat, give me your questions, and then we'll bring them up. Okay. Can I invite our four speakers to come to the front? Martin, Louise, Xavier, Raja, all involved deeply in conversation. Can you come up here so that we can... Colin, stop talking to Raja. We need him up here. Thank you. Thanks, Alan. Sorry, guys, I can't see you. Do you want to move over a second? It's lovely to hear that you've got so much energy for chat, and I hope that means that we're not creating too much hot air, because the climate could do without it. And let's hope that our hot air actually helps us all to make real changes going forward. Now, really, friends, I kept you to time as, fairly short because I wanted you to have time to talk to each other. And I don't know how to do this. So we're going to have a bit of an adventure together. I've got some questions from members of the audience, which might filter in. But I want to know, first of all, I'm going to start with Louise. Louise, what questions do you bring to people of faith? I mean, you've talked to us about your passion, and you want us to get on with it. What questions have arisen for you in these conversations today?
Hello, can you hear me? Right, okay. I love the question, right, especially thinking of Christians, Northern Ireland, you know what I mean? Well, Jesus. What would Jesus do? There you go. There's my question. What would Jesus do? I think that all the time. And, you're not the first who's referred to, I was talking to somebody over there, a prophet. It's very unpopular. It's not, the prophets were not popular. It's not something that often sits comfortably with me. I feel for my family too, because it's quite uncomfortable coming from a Protestant unionist background, which is very traditional, very conservative. You know, you are the black sheep of the family when you have that deep love, that deep connection, and that kind of energy, that prophet. Because I kind of denied it for a long time. So I suppose what would Jesus do? And I often think about Christians, and this is why I'm so delighted this is happening about Loughney. And I often have thought in the last year, where are you? You know, where are you on this campaign? Like, where are the church leaders? I stood on the shores of Ballyronan and it flew out of my mouth, that speech. I didn't want to make a speech, but it just flew out. And it was again when the things come and I got the megaphone and I was like, I didn't want a megaphone at a wake. You know, I didn't want to, but I was like, I can't watch this anymore. So for the Christians, I'd say, what would Jesus do? And where are you? On the lock, and what are you doing? And where are the church elders? Where are our ministers? You know, as a woman, I have felt really let down by the church in many ways over the years. But, you know, this is an opportunity for congregations and for our religious leaders to really step up. So I suppose my question is, where are you? And when are you going to get on with it and get some more stuff done?
Okay, thank you. I don't know who to pick on next. Have you got questions for your colleagues who have spoken? Are there things about what you've been hearing here or things that are interesting for you? So give us a bit of your reaction. What are you hearing when you hear you're an Ulster Protestant and here's a Jesuit, Catholic Jesuit from France?
Very gentle, lovely eco-spirituality, very powerful thing. So I really was encouraged with those eco-spiritual retreats. I think we need that here.
Okay.
And this Quran, I wrote it down. Just loved it. The love abounds, was it? That quote. Where was it? Love's wealth with abounding love. I'd love to hear more about that.
In fact,
it probably is. Just hold it here.
in fact, anybody is interested in the quotations from the Quran, there is a printout on the way out which you can collect and you can check it yourself. So I just didn't make it up. So feel free. And then there are a few translations of the Quran, because Quran is translated into loads of languages. And even in the English version itself, there's a whole range of translators. Because you can only translate something based on what you know. For example, somebody says, I have a wild pain in my head. How do you say? Can you really appreciate what he's saying? You can only translate something based on what you know. Okay.
Xavier.
I'd just like from the Islamic tradition, because this idea of being called a prophet, and that's not an easy role. I have echoes of that in my Jesuit communities. But I think often the idea is that the prophet is the one that goes out and shout and denounce and just behaviors. But you were saying that Islam would take the teachings of many prophets, among them Moses or Jesus, that we, I think, as Christians may not define as prophets. Firstly, prophets would be Isaiah, Jeremiah, so the one that goes out, shout, are put apart from the king part. But then, so how would you define a prophet in the Islamic tradition? That may help us to accept that we are prophets.
I struggle with terminologies because it can mean anything to different people. But the Quran says, I'm quoting the Quran, that Muslims believe in whatever was revealed to the messengers, Jesus, Moses, Jesus, Prophet Muhammad. They are all prophets, they are messengers, but I can't claim to be a prophet.
So that would mean that prophet could be defined as messenger.
Yes, from religious point of view.
Okay. And I find Lee perhaps more gentle than the idea of what I have as a prophet. I mean, the guys that goes out and shout and is despised by the establishment, all those things with Jeremiah, Isaiah, some of the biblical prophets, the books of the prophet.
Would they disrupt the status quo? Would it be a disruptive role of the prophet? It would be disrupting the cultural status quo?
Are they activists? Is that the better word?
Well, I would say sometimes they're not maybe naturally activists. Like sometimes I think, out of the mouths of babes, sometimes if you hear a child say something, it can be prophetic and it can be very innocent and pure. It's not necessarily an intentional activism. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think seeing them as activists isn't. They're people driven by a sense that what is currently acceptable is not enough. There is more, and so the whole sense, in particularly the Abrahamic faiths, of revelation, of further revealing of what has either been hidden or lost. And your very powerful sense, and I know it's a sense of many of the people here from the churches, of where the hell are the leaders? Yeah. Where are they? And I think the fact of the matter is there's about 1.5 million religious environmental programs in the world. I would say 95% of those are not done by the religious leadership. They're done exactly as Xavier has done. They're done in the way that I know that the group that came together to create Al Mazan have done, which is that they've quietly, patiently just got on with it. In one case, my beloved friend Fazl Khalid, for the last 40 years, and they've chipped away. And then they've dug up the texts. This wonderful document is full of the most fabulous texts, as is Laudato Si in terms of Christian tradition. But it's almost as though the book of Revelation, Apocalypse, the whole notion of apocalypse, which is so badly used by environmental movements to scare people to hell, actually means to uncover. Yeah, lift the veil. To uncover, to lift the veil. And I think the role of the prophet is very often to lift the veil of stuff that we very carefully covered up so that you don't have to see it. And sometimes that can be very painful and sometimes it can be a joy. I was sitting with Sister Anne at the back there. It is Sister, isn't it? Yeah, Sister Anne being unduly modest at the back there. And what she picked up from you was passion.
Yes.
And, we have religious orders called the Passionists. We've lost that ability to be excited. Yeah. And I think religious leaders, Christ said it about them, the Prophet Muhammad said it about them, they've ended up defending the status quo. Mm-hmm. They're not where you're going to find change. I think, Louise, that you will probably find if you scratch below the surface that an awful lot of the people involved with you are there because of their faith. It's just they didn't realize they could talk about it. Yeah. And that's the sadness.
Thank you. There are two things running in my head that have been very strong words this morning. One is love, which I thought it was lovely that you weren't talking religion, but it was all... The other is hope. I stuck that up with blue tack, more blue tack, and some sticky tape, and it still fell off. Where is the hope? Sometimes, no matter how hard we try, and no matter how good our technology, no matter how many bright people we get onto the case, we seem to be not solving the core issues, or the abuses go around. You know, we fix one problem here and then the problem moves, because power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so no matter what we do, we still end up destroying things. What does our faith or what is your passion for the environment or your love of God or something say to this? Where's the hope? Where's the love?
I would say that hope is in love, in the sense that it took me time and a lot of work with different eco projects. I think what I feel as a difference for me being Christian is that my hope, and we have two words in France, so it helps, or let's call it my religious hope, is based in the fact that Christ is dead and has risen. And by this is promising me that love has the final word. And so each time I love, I am already tasting something of eternal life. And so by going in these different actions, eco actions, that's a way for me to love today. And in a way, that's enough. Even if at human level, I would say human hope, I don't see that the result is going to work, that we will stay under 2 degrees or 1.5, that we will save the log, that we will, even if I'm not sure that the result is going to be good, I still have a deep motivation to love, because that's where God is and is calling me. And in a way, that's enough. It doesn't mean that I don't care for the result at human level. I'm trying to move things and to get it. But if it doesn't work, in a way, that does not say that what I'm doing is not good. And so for me, hope is in love, that the final word will be for love.
Hope for me has come from actual experience of things changing. So when we invited the 5 religions to Assisi in 86, we had all the major environmental organizations, conservation groups, whatever they call themselves, and the 5 religious leaders that we had there, who were deeply thoughtful people and had written or had helped create these 5 documents about the environment and their faith, drawing out the different strengths. So the basis of Al-Mizan was the Assisi statement designed by the World Muslim League for that event. And we had a retreat, and at that retreat we had senior environmental leaders as well as them. And after the retreat, and we did press conferences, we had huge media interest in it. After the event, Prince Philip received a letter from every single one of the environmental groups there. There had been huge opposition to having anything with the faiths because we were seen as anti-science. And in fact, we were kindly described as pre-diluvian. And their complaint, apart from the fact that it took place at all, and all of them said this, was, what has justice got to do with the environment? Because every faith had said, but this is about justice. Justice towards the rest of life and justice towards people, care for the poor. It was not in the vocabulary of the environmental movement in 1986 that justice was anything to do with this. So we brought that in. And it's now common knowledge. But at the same time, I was invited in 1995 to go and address the annual conference of Christian Aid to defend why I was anti the alleviation of poverty, because I was an environmentalist. Because it was thought that the environment meant you left the poor to be poor. And now Christian Aid is very happy to be one of the leading groups on climate change and so on. So what I have seen has been very much what you've done, Louise, which is just to keep going and saying how it seems and to challenge, as it were, the Pharisees and the scribes of our time. And if I think back particularly in the Muslim world, one of the most extraordinary achievements that I saw was when IFES, which is the largest Islamic environmental group, hosted in 2015 a meeting of all the ministers of development of all the Islamic countries in Istanbul, and they issued a statement about the reduction of fossil fuels. Now, we're still working around that. It's going to take time. But that was prophetic. And so my hope is things don't change overnight. And I mean, John talking yesterday about the loch, he was saying it's going to take 20 years, 30 years. But if you, Taoism is one of the faiths I love most of all. And in the Tao Te Ching, there is this just very simple statement that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the very first step. And I've seen those very first steps. And in many places, I've seen groups that are now maybe 200 miles into that 1,000-mile journey. And it's exciting.
Okay, thank you. So one of the questions that was given to me was, what ideas do we have to encourage global governance for climate justice? You know, I think we can feel very disempowered here because banks and governments, and it's all happening up there, and we feel like we've got no control over the burning of the Amazon. And so what ideas, how do we encourage our people that are gathered today not to lose hope in that context? I love that. Isn't that great? There's an honest silence right there.
Well,
Louise.
I want to say a bit about hope.
Yep.
Remember, when did we first meet? That was 2020, was it?
I was trying to think, so there's a story. Do you want to hear stories? So
Always.
John Barry
He's
picked
responsible
on me
for
and
this.
decided that I was the mouthpiece that could be pulled out from the Presbyterian Church to start pushing and poking. I think that's what he was doing. I consider John Barry, I'll say this quietly, don't tell the Presbyterian Church I said it. I think he's a prophet.
Yeah.
You know, he quotes Christian scripture far more often than I do. And I was brought up in the Brethren, which is very Bible-based. So he roped me into doing...
You and Martin Miguel.
Doing stuff in Queen's.
Yes, and I was there in the audience, because John Barry taught me everything I know, so the prophet actually, without me knowing, I don't know how he did this, but he made me this, because he just inspired me. But that meeting, right, this meeting today is 2024. That meeting, I think it was COP26, so it was 2020, is that right, before COVID? Was glad. 2020, yeah, 2020, right? So you had it. It was brilliant speakers. We had Martin Miguel and you, and it was wonderful. I was like flying from Cookstown to get there, and there was me. How many people were in that audience?
Were there more than three? There were
think
certainly
there were
not more than three.
Three.
But it was recorded. It's out there somewhere.
And 3 people turned up interested in what faith leaders had to say on the climate crisis. And then here we have this. So this is hope. So the message is getting out there, and we must, like you're talking about governance, right? The people are the planet. Ignore the governments most of the time because the people lead. And until you kick up a fuss, they're not going to do anything. So you're the government, you are the people, and you decide, and then you meet, and you discuss, and you put the pressure on. And I know the Loch Ness campaign looks really massive, and it looks like there's loads of people. And same with Save Our Sperrins, there's not. But those few people doing something can have massive effects. So if you want to see massive global governmental change, it's up to you to do this, because that gives me hope. 2020, there were 3 of us. I was in the audience going, oh! And then 2 others were excited, but they all were mates of the speakers. And then today we have this, so that gives me hope.
And I was getting phone calls. My father had taken ill, and I was getting phone calls from the care home. in the middle, I was running out, taking phone calls, and yes, get him to hospital, and then coming back in and doing
But it was the best.
Going, my world is falling apart.
But it was the best chat I went to. There were 10 chats. There were 10 for COP26. John put on one a day because he's mad. He is mad. And we are mad. You have to be a bit mad to do this and stick your neck out. And he put on 10 and I went to 5. And that one with the 3 of us was the best conversation I think I'd heard on the environment in a very, very long time. And it was brilliant. I loved every moment of it.
No contact without a trace. Someone said to me recently, and they were talking about science and the fact that every touch, the potential contagion, but we don't know the consequences of what we're sowing. Roger.
Well, I was going to say, do you recall nearly the last slide that I said, but one slide? I mentioned the Arabic word fardu ain and fardu kifaya. Individual responsibility and collective responsibilities. So we have to start from the very bottom. In other words, every one of us, individuals, and then we have to get together. And I didn't explain too much over there for what individuals have to do. Little bit. And I did mention, don't waste. And then we have to have this, like what we're doing today, community faiths. And then the NGOs push it up a bit higher, and then the NGOs to influence the government. So from small beginnings, we get the momentum going, get everybody all worked up, and say, yes, we have to do this.
And I think, sorry, no, go on.
I see a hand up and I'm feeling sorry for him. I'm going to go and ask, what's your question?
Seeing we're discussing my question, I would like to raise it up one more level. I feel that a lot of the world have not had a seat at the table to have their say. We've got the OECD, that's $1, one vote. We've got the United Nations, which is one government, one vote. But really, the climate and ecological crisis, or the poly-crisis, is a global phenomenon. It's obvious that no one community or one country or one nation is going to solve that. We need a bit of utopianism, in my view. We're going to have to break down the tribalism that plagues us everywhere, whether it's Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, you name it, and get everybody around the table. And that's why I think something like a world parliament is now necessary in the 21st century. You can say that's too utopian, but I just can't see how else to solve our problems.
Thank you. Can I come in on that? Because that's very interesting, especially the sort of statism. So one of the things that we've done over the years is we've done an audit of what the faiths own. Nobody had ever done that before. Partly because most faiths have a nice myth that they're sustained by spirituality rather than by investment rates or land rent or anything else like that, but actually we all are. And we began a movement, we got all the major faiths had made their great statements about the environment, and then we noted that 50% of schools worldwide, 64% of schools in sub-Saharan Africa are faith-maintained or sustained or involved. A third of all universities, more than a third of all medical facilities. As I said earlier, 5% of commercial forests are owned by faiths, and they are the fourth largest investing group in the world, with $14 trillion of investment, roughly 10% of the investable world. And that's just institutionally held money, not private money of believers, which is another category, which probably takes us up to nearer 30% of the total capital market can be influenced by faith. And one of the problems is that the faiths have outhoused their investments to fund managers because it's easier, and as long as they knew what you were against, that was it. Religions are very good at being against things. Our challenge to them in Faith Invest is to say, we know what you're against, like fossil fuels, what are you actually for? And we've now got about $100 billion worth of religious investments from right across the faith world that wants to move into faith-consistent investing. In other words, they've dug deep into their values, their teachings, their beliefs, and they've realized that what they're doing at the moment is contrary to that. They need the return at a level in order to be able to sustain the schools and the hospitals and the welfare and so on. But they need to break. And so we went to, at the request of an old friend of mine who was heading the World Bank's Climate Investment Fund, we went to them and we said, why can't we work with you? Because one of the problems for the faiths is they need to have due diligence done on what they can invest in. They're not just going to throw their money in because someone says, oh, I think we could reforest the whole of North Africa. They need to actually have the due diligence done because this is money they hold on behalf of communities. It's not held on behalf of stakeholders, shareholders, it's held on behalf of communities. So we went to the World Bank. After 2.5 years of legal work funded by the Climate Investment Fund of the World Bank, they had to conclude that, unfortunately, it was impossible for something that was not state-run to invest in the future through the World Bank. It could only be a national government fund or a fund coming through a national government from private enterprise. So that fell flat. Then this friend of mine moved on. She's now the head of the Green Climate Fund, which invests 30 billion a year, came out of the Paris COP. And she rang me up and said, we can do it now. We can actually work with the faiths, and we're also working with the arts world, we're working with the media world. We can work with the factors that are not state-based. And we can together invest in the future. And that has led to the Green Climate Fund going back into the UN world and saying, isn't it time we moved beyond just being nation states, defending our tiny little area? So it is changing. It's changing because the faiths are not national structures. Some are. But on the whole, we're the oldest multinationals in the world. It's just we haven't done very well with it recently. So I do see, talking about hope, we're now looking at joint investment programs in the developing world with the Green Climate Fund, which is taking money from the developed countries, but with the major faiths coming in. And we're also bringing projects in there because most of the projects that are coming to the Green Climate Fund at the moment are coming from national governments who are run by thugs, dictators, bullies, criminals. And Green Climate Fund could only work with them because that was what their constitution said. We've changed the constitution. 2 months ago, the constitution changed, and now they can work with any community that, for the good of people and planet, wish to invest. So how did that happen? That happened because we went to groups like like the Catholic religious orders and said, do you know that your investments are actually nothing to do with your values? They changed them. We've done the same with the Taoists in China. We've done the same with the Shinto. We've done the same with many Muslim groups. So we are stakeholders in the planet as faithful people. But we behaved as though we were just gadflies. Let's take seriously, we could fund the entire economic change that the planet needs to see from the money we have invested.
Xavier, you worked previously with an organisation at Forges, at the south of Paris, which is not a faith organisation, but I thought it looked really exciting. I had a look on his website to see what it was. Could you tell us a bit about that? And the reason is because it seemed to me that it's about trying to break down the barriers. We're talking about different faiths needing to talk to each other and understand each other and inspire each other with how to use our resources better and to perhaps gang up, I don't know, to make change. But I think there might be other groups in the world that faith people are also part of. And, there can be people here who might be scientists or agriculturalists or, whatever you are in retail, who can make a change in other places. Tell about that organization.
Yeah, that could be a way to answer. I think source of hope will come when we act together, when we connect it can be in our community faith, but it can be outside our Christian world, our Muslim world. And so this project is a secular project called Campus de la Transition, so the Transition Campus. And it started 6 years ago, and the idea was coming from different professors in different universities and some students. Think the university system today is not built to teach really what transition should be about.
When you say transition, you mean transition
ecological,
towards...
social and ecological transition to a sustainable world. Our French system of universities owned by the state only has been pushed in the last 15 years towards competition for the Shanghai ranking system. So the Shanghai ranking system is mainly about research budget and the salary you get when you go out of university. So these two parameters are not pushing you to develop socio-economics little businesses. They push you to send your students to do big finance in London or in Paris because they will win triple salary than the one doing social work in France. So they are valued 3 times more than the one that goes to the social economy. So the idea of these professors from different universities was we need another place, another kind of teaching. And so we started an eco-village because, and that comes to the hope, so to act together, we need concrete actions, we need to do it together, we need experience together, and from this eco-village, then it became, or at the same time, it was an eco-campus, so students and professors would come to our place for 3 days, 2 months, as a kind of immersive experience. And we did not invent that. One source of inspiration for us was the Schumacher College, started by Satish Kumar 30 years ago in England, and the Sustainable Institute started 15 years ago in South Africa. So there are other places that are doing these kind of things. And I really think that in this project, most of the people had no religion at all. Some of us had religious backgrounds, religious life. But the good thing that we were trying to change things together. And from these concrete things came great conversation about meaning, spiritual quest. So I really believe we should try to act together, and then we'll see where we go.
Thank you. I think one of the things that I realize as a minister is that ministers forget that people in congregations are not ministers, and everybody doesn't just spend their day thinking religious words. You're out there doing real stuff, whether it's relationships with your neighbours or running a sports club or doing music, whatever it is you do, or you've got a relationship with a grandchild. And all of these things are opportunities to embody the faith that has been entrusted to us and to let that breath be fully who we are. So I really wanted to not just keep the secular. France is very good on separating secular from religious. At least they think they are, but they don't realise that they can't do it either. Ministers try to do it, but secularists are just as bad. Anyway, I'm not supposed to be talking, but I just wanted to explain that question. So I suppose what I'm saying is there's all these fabulous people here who are so different from each other, and yet somehow on the same page. And I also know that there are people in the audience. Santosh is from the Hindu religion and has a paper that he would have loved to share. I'm not going to invite him to share it now. I'm going to ask somebody to organise an event and talk to Santosh about having a future event, because these conversations need to continue. And you can't keep relying on the same people to keep organising, because we get tired. So I'm putting that out there to say, think about who you know, what you know, and how you can carry things forward. Can we, first of all, I'm going to say thank you, and then we'll come back and say thank you at the end. I want to say thank you to the Agape Centre, Reverend Emily Hyland, especially to Stephen and Rosemary, who helped us to serve the tea and greeted us and looked after us so well. I think they may have slipped on. I want to thank Alan Meban, who's done a miraculous job with the sound over the last few days. I want to thank Juanita and the rest of the Joining the Dots Together team. I want to thank you for coming. I also want to say there's a wee box. If you feel like you'd like to contribute towards the costs, we would be very grateful for that. I want a special thank you to Edwin Graham from the Interfaith Forum, who has organised soup. For those of you who'd like to stay today, there's soup and bread and everything's vegetarian. There's a little bit of vegan food. If you're not vegan, don't eat the vegan food. Leave it for the vegans, okay? Because there's not enough for everybody to eat vegan. I wanted also to highlight that tonight there's a celebration of difference, because today is International Day of Peace. And that was one of the reasons why I was keen to do this, because for me, climate justice, you can't have peace without it. Oh, yeah. And we can't. Has this one died again? It's the machine. Okay, I'll just shout. It's not the microphone, it's the system. The system gets tired of my voice. So if you're around tonight, 7 o'clock in St Anne's Cathedral for a lovely musical interfaith, international celebration of difference, which should be, as someone much wiser than me said earlier, if it's not worth celebrating, it's not worth saving. I'm going to keep that one. I like that. Very much worth celebrating, very much worth saving. Every one of you, I'm grateful that you're here. I'm looking at my people going, what have I forgotten to say? Oh, and yes, Corrymeela had, the climate justice group of Corrymeela brought Martin over in the first place. We're very grateful because we've stolen him and made good use of you. And it's been a great opportunity. We had an event yesterday with young people, and that's for me, if we can get our teenagers motivated at the point at which they're choosing their A-level subjects or their university degrees and shaping their thinking, that for the future is full of hope. So I want to thank Xavier Benaze, Louise Taylor, Rajun Harun, and Martin Palmer. I want to thank God. If you don't worship God the same as I do, then I know that you'll want to thank somebody or something for the life, for the joy, for the hope. Because we do have something that is worth saving, that's been entrusted to us, and what a joy. So please do join us for lunch, and I look forward to attending the next event that somebody else will organise.